Thank you, Ms. Superman. It's 5:30, and we're going to start on the strategic plan. Mr. Haddow, did you want to start anything else?
I'll be glad to start us if you want me to facilitate. Before I do that, the John Pierce, which several of you people know, I'm assuming the IT guy, his wife is Angie. I'm terrible with names, so I'm reading. They just had a baby.
Yes.
They had a baby girl, and the baby's name is Carly. They're probably being dismissed tomorrow. So everything's well, so I wanted to share
that's
that.
good news.
This, and within the past maybe 20 minutes, I just sent you a document that looks like the 21st century. This is content, what you have in front of you. The other one is, if you want a visual of what Terry Schmidt has done. He just turned it in here about an hour ago. So I wanted to share that with you. We can start with that look first, if you want to, or we can go with the content before we jump that far.
I've been studying the content, so that's fine.
That's fine.
We're staying with the
Me.
content. So in front of you, you got the content a document. And just to give you a broad overview of the document, there are two sections of that. And I think a question that came up is when you read the content, and I probably didn't communicate this very well, if you look at page, this is a sample, if you look at page 5, line number 2, what you see is maximizing student potential work plan, click here. That is a placeholder. We are working on the working plans now as we speak. And at the end, I wanted to give the working plan groups, probably as we're collecting data and trying to figure out which way to go, it could go all the way through September, that you see a finalized working plan document that gets inserted in that placeholder. So for each goal, when you see maximizing student potential or the other goals and you see click here, that is a placeholder because we're still working on that. But the second part of the document, which is you're going to see some sample working plan artifacts that reveal kind of the direction we're going. And they're really at the infancy stages. So just kind of give you an idea on that now. So the first part, I wanted to bring that up to your attention, but the first part is the initial question. Let's discuss the content. And if you say, hey Dan, and just kind of give it an eyeball, does anyone have any outstanding questions of clarification that you need? And then we're dropped down to the mechanics or something that you really think needs to be dismissed, kept, or modified or amended.
I noticed from the last time we went over this to this time, you really condensed it.
That was from feedback from this group, I think, in our other session, and in talking to a board member directly. I kind of took the initiative and hopefully not to step on people's toes. I thought it was an accurate assessment.
Okay.
I just want to applaud you. You are very adept at taking all these different spokes from all these different people and making them into a wheel. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I could see, comments that, Mark had made or Linda had made or, parent groups, and just the way that they all came together into this is just really masterful. And I wanted to applaud you for that. I did have one. I emailed my two questions to Mr. Manuel, so I don't know if he, so you've already seen.
Oh, I sent them to him, so they haven't been made yet, but yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. One of them I just didn't understand what it meant. Hang on, let me find it. On page 5, lines 5 and 6. No, excuse me, lines 6 and 7.
On page 5?
Yes. So it's that first little section under goal 2. The second sentence, best practice staff professional development opportunities will be offered. I don't quite understand what that means.
Yeah, when you have, in our world, and thanks for the question, what we do is we require professional development points for our staff. And part of that, to get into the weeds, staff members are constantly having to work towards their license renewal. So
Right.
when we offer these professional development sessions, it is an opportunity to keep them current with best practices that are out there. So they
Okay.
can do well with the students that they're serving, what they can do well with their own professional growth, but also so they can have these points that the state's requiring for their license renewal when their license is up for renewal.
Okay.
So that's what that means.
Okay.
And so they have choices in the PD sessions that they go to meet those minimum requirements.
And that's one way to get points. So for instance, if some of them are going after 30 points, if they're going from a practitioners to a professional. I may have that wrong. Some of them, they keep their professional license is 60 points. Some of it's 30 points. And every time they go to one of our offered professional development sessions, it is worth 1 point. And our requirement is, and we're still emerging with this, is hey, we expect you to get 12 that we offer. Now they have the autonomy to go to a conference outside of what we offer to get it approved, as long as it meets some conditions. They have to do it during non-contracted hours, and they have to do it so it ties into the instruction, the education.
And do we help them financially with those kinds of things if they want to go?
Kind of, yeah. Principal can approve, through their funding, or if it's a district office initiative and we want people to go to that, we take the financial burden on that. But if a principal sees something that he wants for his staff to develop, i.e. literacy or RTI, and it's PLC or whatever it is, he can send them it, but that's at his cost.
So when we moved away from the green bar accounts, when Shelby County Schools used to have a warehouse, each school was given an allotment of funds, and you could order paper, ink, pens from the warehouse. Well, when we moved to a direct account for the schools with our school allocations, we give them that pot of money where they can use it to buy 21st century furniture, and we have a separate account for 21st century furniture, or they can choose it to spend it on PD. They can send teachers to conferences. So the schools have a choice of what they want to send their staff to. And then we also do some district-wide ones too, where we will pay for that from the central office account.
Any other questions? No.
Page 2, line 2930, when it talks about perception data. So I know there's needs assessment surveys, report opinions. Has there been any discussion about maybe including or considering committees, and how committees, because I know, well, I don't know if this is still true, but I think you meet with teachers or representatives from the school on a regular basis, like putting that perception, or the principals, that's perception data, correct?
Yes, correct.
If we did have a student committee of some kind, stuff like that, like, are there groups that we also can incorporate?
Yes,
or
most
committees,
definitely.
for lack of a better word?
Yeah, and really I think the purpose of this was talk about the type of data versus, it's not just a strict blanket survey to everybody. We can't include that. But that's more of, how do you feel professional development is working in your school? How do you think you've been provided leadership opportunities in your schools? But we could do that through big, broad surveys. We could do it through committee surveys, committee work too. Yes, that can all be included, but it's the type of data versus, here's a student score, here's their achievement.
I'll give you the one in real time that's getting ready to go out there, to give you an example. One is work-life balance survey tied into a wellness clinic. So there's 3 questions that I want our employees to respond to on their perception of, is this a good work-life balance benefit for you? So that's one that's homegrown by me. But the other one that the state requires is the Vanderbilt survey, perception survey from your teachers. And there you really get into of how they feel about the team evaluation model, how they feel about the process and their scores. That's their teacher perception. Another one that's coming, and probably on the front burner closer than I realize because time's getting away from me, is the advanced ed accreditation surveys.
Right.
And that's going to come, and that one's going to hit all of the stakeholders. That's going to hit the students, the parents, the teachers, probably the administration. And then that's going to unfold here because the advanced ed accreditation is coming in the fall. So that's where, those are some other concrete examples of perception data.
And I definitely think that the committee survey data is important because of the amount of committee work that we're trying to use as a district. So when we have like a facilities committee, how successful did you think this program was? Did you feel that your input was influential? There's lots of questions that we can get from those committees.
Right, and timeliness should be right after we have the committee. Like you serve on this committee, or the committees that I've done with this, if I were wise and I already did it, is that those 15 to 20 parents, hey, did you feel like your input and opinions were valued? Would have been a question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but I didn't catch it at the time. So.
Okay.
I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess another perception data would be parent or student feedback. Or we don't think we talked about last time was, how do we take surveys of the jobs teachers are doing, get,
Right.
Customer feedback. That would be another
Type of perception data.
I'm hoping, Mark, that Advanced Ed survey hits
Get some of that. That'd be good.
Good to know.
Any other questions? I'm kind of going around.
I just really had a question more. When you start with the beliefs, and when you see them lined up in the format that I looked at, with the content, it lists each belief. And when you look at the first one, it says, we believe in focusing on what matters most as a belief. It sort of just hits me that, should it be more definitive? And you can
be.
tell me I'm wrong,
That's,
but it just sort of hit me when I saw it, when they were all listed together and there wasn't the explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the descriptor's in the paragraph, but that did come back, that one came back and there's some parental editing feedback with some of the committee work.
Okay.
Now we can, if that's,
Okay.
if semantically, we can always look at, hey, can we make this different? I'm not into a semantic power struggle with people.
So you would be more specific, like we believe in focusing on
Yes,
students.
yes.
Or student impact.
Non-academic and academic achievement of students. I mean, like I said.
We believe in focusing on what
and
matters
it's-
most, which is our students,
Yeah.
serving our students.
Kind of says we focus on what matters most, and then it's like, okay,
Stop.
what does
Yeah,
matter most, right?
That was, and it wasn't that, it was where, it's when you, and it really jumps out even more when they have the content one that you just sent out, and it lists those 4 or 5 beliefs, and the first one is, we believe in focusing on what matters most.
That was just to build
Who knows
suspense.
what that
I was just
is?
trying to build suspense.
There just wasn't,
Cliffhanger?
yeah, it just wasn't, I don't know.
Okay, I'll work on.
It just,
I'll play with
yeah,
some
it just
more.
needed something.
Anything else that you guys would like to discuss on the content or the questions on the
We
content?
spent a lot of time in our previous conversation about the plan, talking about whether or not the plan should include measurable goals and maybe even a few big ideas. And I mentioned this last time we were together, and I went back and looked at it today. It's impressive to me that I can tell you that Commissioner McQueen has said, we're going to raise the average to a 21. We're going to be in the top half of the NAEP, and we're going to have over half of our graduates get a certificate or a degree, post-secondary certificate or degree. Those are the 3 big goals that the state put out there. And what's impressive to me about that is I can remember that and tell it to you. I didn't write that plan, I didn't adopt that plan, didn't vote on that plan, I just saw it and said, oh, those are big goals. And Mark talked last time about, we're going to put a man on the moon this decade. Should our plan include 1 or 2 or 3 of those, we are going to achieve this and you can measure it in this way, kinds of goals? We went round and round last time, and I noticed the categories of a report card this on page 5 has been added. But should we have 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 big goals with, the state has said they're going to get to 21. We are going to, and here's the metric that we're shooting for. And obviously I brought it up, I feel like that would be a good thing to have. It looks to me like the state tried to take all of their 5 broad initiatives and the 80 or 90 strategies that they have underneath that and funnel it all up to, this is all building to these 3 goals. So they want to raise ACT scores to 21, and then they jump right over to, we're going to focus on early grade literacy. We're going to provide assessments prior to grade 3 that people believe in. We're going to have a uniform way to screen kindergarten readiness. And all of that they're trying to build up to that ACT score in the NA. I guess that's more in the NAEP, moving to the top half of the NAEP.
Kind of like a culminating data piece
But
that rises.
when you tell that to an average citizen, they're not going to remember the uniform pre-K screening, pre-K or kindergarten readiness screening, but they might remember our goal is to get to 21 on the ACT. Should we have 2 or 3 of those defining goals that everything else is working towards?
Good question. And the working plan defines some of that. If you look at now, again, that's an emerging plan. We may want to spend time on that, but I think your question would be well, why wouldn't those be in the strategic plan? much like the Tennessee Succeeds is what I imagine that you read. And so what I'm curious about on that, my own inclination, and it's just my inclination, and it's a philosophy, is get your processes right and get your beliefs right and set your goals right. And then from the working plan, you're going to see the objectives that match that goal. So I'm going to give you, for instance, because it's closer and it's one that I toy with between, back and forth. HR is if one of my guiding principles, and this is a minute goal, but I think it's so important that I keep continue. I have to get back within 24 hours to people that reach out to me. So that's a goal. And how can I measure that? Because I think it's that important. But a bigger goal with HR is, how do I know that I've done or we've done everything we can to dignify our employees, our teachers, to make sure that when they are with us that 4th and 5th year, they are tenure eligible and they are doing the best with their performance. So in my working plan, I know that if we have, let's say for instance, 80 people that we've hired over these past 2 years, that's my baseline. And I'm trying to measure the process that we're using. I'm trying to assess the process that we're using to develop these 80 people to perform at a level of 4 or 5 by the time their 4th and 5th year hits, because that's a tenure ready, growth oriented achievement type of person. So when I'm doing my working plan, I got to figure out, well, what's our current rate, what's our current percentage, and where do we want to be? And so the ACT versus the performance of a non-tenured teacher is, if I say I want 95% of our teachers to be at that 4 or 5 level their 4th and 5th year, that is a working process. But that you're going to see that in the developing working plan. So I think the question is you're right, you want to set a goal, just like a basketball coach or football coach. Hey, we want to improve our rebounding, we want to improve our assist to turnover ratio, we want to improve here the benchmark would be if the culminating experience is ACT. My only concern with this is philosophy, is that if I set that goal of 26, is it really the goal? And it's good to have out there, but being a process person, I want to make sure that every kid has adequacy and equity, and that they're being treated, and that they have more value than a number. Because I know lots of kids that are given the best that they can, and because the limitations that may be in their control or beyond their control, they may be hamstrung to ever reaching that goal. So that's just a philosophy, and it's open for discussion of which way you want. I want to see it develop in the working plan, and let us manage that through honest committee work. And hey, where are we? And measuring, hey, what corrective steps do we need to take? And another real live one is ACT. We know that the high school, that hey, that ACT 24.1, what a wonderful deal for kids. 21 gets you the Hope Scholarship, 24.1. But the goal behind that is how many kids are really college ready based on the ACT standards. So if you look at college readiness, how they define it is maybe, hey, based on your scores, 50% are college ready in this area, and they are, based on data, they're going to get a C when they take these college courses. So that would be an offshoot of that. But if you're looking at the process, is, hey, yeah, there's 20, how many people hit that 24, how many are at the 33, what is it? But how many people are we leaving behind that aren't even at the 21? So my goal, for really thinking college ready and financial hardship, should that be a goal too? A 21 for that cohort, or a 26 to move everybody up? And I think that's more of a process than it is hey, let's put this as a finite goal that we're aiming for. And that's a philosophy. That's not a right or wrong. That's a.
And I will clarify that we have looked at other districts' strategic plans. We looked at Oak Ridge, we looked at Maryville, we looked at Williamson County, we looked at Knox County, and none of them have a target like that. We did find Maryville, which is a lot of this is based on, and I think it was Terry Harris who actually found the Maryvilles and sent that to us, Price's better half, who actually showed us how that working plan works for them, and we've taken that and really run with it and developed it into all the different areas. But I think that you had a really good point last time, that choosing those 1 or 2 elevator talking points or what we can sell to the community would be a challenge. And the reason I say it would be a challenge is the ACT average means nothing to a kindergarten teacher. It doesn't mean anything to a 2nd grade teacher, a 3rd grade teacher. Now when we get to the high school world, yes, a lot of the teachers can relate to that component. But that's why I think it's multi-tiered. I think all of these objectives that we're going to measure and track with the committee, and we're going to do quarterly analysis of how we're proceeding towards these goals is important, but narrowing in on, here are the 4 metrics that we're going to use for the district, I think that would be a challenge.
But let me ask, when you go to, when we're looking at this under maximize student potential, and we have our objectives, and then if you click on the work plan,
Yes.
and the work plan then will list, like you have here,
Yes.
the number of advanced placement exams with a score of 3 or above, percentage of graduates leaving high school with at least 3 hours of college credit, ACT average. That's what you're going to use.
Yes.
Yes.
And when you have the actual performance and then you have target, are you going to put a target in there for those?
Yes.
Okay.
And then also, I think.
So that
we-
is, I mean, that's exactly what Mr. Hoover is
Right.
asking for.
And what I was wanting to, I was actually thinking.
So are there pages in here that were not in the email that we got?
Yes. So we're showing you skeletons of the working plans. So what we are also, and we may tweak this, what I also think we want to look at too is our 3-year average for different metrics. So let's say, where were we over the past 3 years? What's our target for last year? Did we hit our target from last year? What's our target for this year? So I think those metrics will be helpful. I think we'll be able to really track in a detailed way a full comprehensive picture of the district.
Yeah. So I think you misinterpreted my question a little bit, as I used the example of ACT score, and I began hearing back from both of you of why that's not a good target or a good goal to use. I'm not saying that's the goal we should use. My question was, should we have a measurable goal, or 2 or 3 or 5, that sort of are the umbrella, the theme behind this strategic plan? And I would reflect back to you what you said about new hires and our 4th and 5th year teachers. And my goal is to have those 4th and 5th year teachers performing at 4 and 5. You need to be at a 4 or a 5 by your 4th year so that you're on track for tenure. That's a pretty specific goal. You need to be at a 4 or 5. And I would reflect back to you that you said, I really don't want to put a number on a kid. Mark is not all that bright. He has his challenges. A 16 might be a tremendous victory for him as a student. But 4 or 5, you immediately went to and put a number on that teacher. And I'm not suggesting, whether we use ACT or whatever we use, I'm not suggesting that the goal would be that Mark makes a 26 or 25.5. The goal would be that the average is 25.5. And if that's wrong with respect to overemphasizing our high achievers and leaving kids behind, then choose a goal that focuses on what's right. And if you want to say that somewhere
Choose the state
between
goal.
somewhere between 80 and 90% of our kids are going to enroll in a 4-year college. And you alluded to ACT as a good measure, or at least the accepted measure, of college readiness. So maybe our goal is that that same percentage, 85 or 90% of our kids are eligible for HOPE, qualify for HOPE. But whatever it is, and as far as the state goal, Lisa, I think that's great. The state sets goals a year in advance, a year ahead, looking a year into the future. To me, the purpose of this strategic plan is to say, if I stack those years on top of each other for 5 in a row, where am I going to be at the end of that 5 years? I'm going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. Well, there's some intermediate steps that have to happen. First, I got to put a heavy piece of equipment into orbit. Then I probably need to launch a living organism and bring it back alive. And then I got to figure out how to orbit the moon. Then I got to figure out how to land on the moon. Then I got to figure out how to get off the moon and back home. But that's where I'm headed. That's my goal. To me, that is what a strategic plan is all about. This is where we're headed. It's a lofty goal. It's something different than where we are today. And it's something that's easy for the community to understand, and it's something that's inspirational to our team members, and to the community. So I still advocate that we ought to have 2 or 3 or 4 measurable goals in here that say 5 years from now, this is where we want to be, and it's better than where we are today. But I don't sense a big consensus on that point. So I'll stop there and say, I really, really think that's very important to a strategic plan, to have a measurable goal that defines what we're shooting for. Like, I want my 4th and 5th year teachers, I want my 4th year teachers to be on track for 10. That's a measurable goal.
And I think we're saying the same thing. I
Same
think
thing.
we're just talking about where that is in the plan and what that looks like, because our goal to maximize student potential, I think that is a lofty goal, I think, because we're talking about every student at every level. And so when you look at the working plan, and you can turn to the back and see, we have these list of performance measures that we're going to use. So we're going to use the number of advanced placement exams with a 3 or higher. We're going to use the percentage of graduates leaving with 3 hours at least of college credit. We're going to use how many have 12 hours of college credit. We're going to use the percentage of RTI students at the elementary, middle school, and high school level. ACT average is there. We're going to use CTE certification. I think all these are so important that if we have these and we have a committee that's really marching towards these, I think we're saying the same thing. I think the problem when we're looking at a school, we're not putting a man on the moon the same way. What we're saying is we're going to do the best for every single child. And the groups change. Yes.
And I don't want to jump in front of Mark because I know he hasn't had a turn to ask a question. Okay. But what Ken just said I guess, fueled a question for me. So when we're looking at the working plan in the back, and I apologize if we've jumped
No,
too
that's
far
okay.
ahead. Okay, but Ken was talking about specific steps, like we want to get to X, and the first year we've got to do this, the next year we have to do this. Okay, so in the back, on all of the, measurable pieces, there's actual performance, and then we see target for the next year.
Yes.
So my question is, are those targets already filled out for 5 years in advance, or is it something that goes year by year? Does it depend on the section?
Right, that's the challenge when you read the measure in the content area.
Mhm.
You're constantly, in my opinion, is you're constantly measuring, hey, what is our current status? And are we making progress towards our target? And then the question becomes, all right, well, what variables are in place that need to be redefined or corrected or continued? And how much time frame are you working on that to see if you're going in the right direction? Another example on that, and I'm going to give you real life examples. I know it may be controversial, and I may be out of line saying this because it's really not my world, would be the Eureka Math and RTI. So let's say with RTI. So we do these assessments with RTI. We get people, students placed based on what these assessments are saying. And based on the assessments, we realize that some students need Tier 2 support. So they need some additional time and some help. And how many kids need even more intense support at Tier 3. So that would be, hey, what are we doing in our tier programs, and what are our intervention specialists doing, or our RTI specialists doing? What variable is in place, and how many people do we roll off back to Tier 1? And if we're getting these people from, hey, we've identified you in your Tier 2, and then later on we do the assessment again, and the assessment says, hey, we've had progress and we've had success. What are we doing well, and why are these kids rolling back to Tier 1? And so that would be a measurement. And so in our world, because you're dealing with human beings and students and performance and emotions and the developing child or the developing adolescent, you're constantly trying to figure out what's hitting, what's working, what's going well. Go to the AP world. The AP world is, yeah, here's the data, here's the assessment. It's a summative assessment at the end of the year. It's not a formative assessment. It's a one-time shot that this kid's going to come in and take an AP exam. And then you look at these AP scores and you figure out, this person's really knocking the socks off it. They're scoring at a 4 and the national average is a 3. You try to figure out, hey, what's that person doing? Is it training? Is it relationship? Is it rigor? Is it blended classroom? Is it facilitator more than a direct instructor? And then you have to look at the other people that may not be scoring as well, and then you have to assess, measure, hey, what type of training have you had in the past 4 years, or the past 2 years, or the past year? So to answer your question, I don't know if you can say, hey, how far you want to roll this out.
Right.
With some variables, because some of them you have a new student cohort coming in
Right.
that didn't have that predicted score to be at a higher threshold, or it could be at a higher threshold, and you have to increase the rigor. You just kind of have to play your audience, so to speak, and play what you're given. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that these
This is-
columns grow out
yes.
year by year.
Yes, and
Okay.
as we're going through this, we're constantly trying to assess, hey, how's this cohort doing?
Okay.
What's going on with this cohort? What have we put in place? Where are we spending our resources to make sure that, hey, and I'm going back to yours, that our focus that matters the most, is it really mattering the most? And that would be the student-centered, personalized world would be my guess if you were to complete that thought. And that's my take on it, being around what I see happening. Well, how do you do this? You have this committee work that goes on either quarterly, semi-annually, or yearly to say, how do we do with these high priorities in the academic world, in the HR world, in the facilities world, in the, in the board effectiveness world? How are we doing on this?
If your goal setting is looking 12 months into the future, what is it that makes this a 5-year strategic plan?
Good question. So if you look at the strategic plan is the strategic plan. So the content of the strategic plan may be 30,000 feet up and looking down. The working plan is what you're asking. The working plan is the plan that you adjust on a yearly basis. So this 5-year plan, the content on this first section, that would be, and then the terminology that you hear, and I don't know if I've identified it, it should be a working, living document. It shouldn't be, hey, we're locked into stone, and because there are some variables out there that are going to, sorry for the vernacular, chuck and jive on us that you have to adjust to that you didn't foresee happen. So it's kind of a working document. I think it's the working plan that is going to take, is the fun part. Yeah.
So I think of the strategic plan, and it's usually been presented in other environments as, in part, a tool that's designed to introduce consistency. So we're not going to be shooting at this target this month and that target next month. We've got a long-range goal in mind that we're going to continue to march toward. Now, I agree with you that you shouldn't lock it in stone. You should be ready to come back and adjust and adapt and modify. But theoretically, you're setting a vision that you're committing to, and you're telling the entire organization, we're not going to be flipping from pillar to post. And in education, that's a big thing about what's the latest flavor. You know, should we co-teach or segregate? You know, there's always something new. Part of the idea of the strategic plan is to provide some consistency of expectations that we know we're marching towards this goal. So if the goals are only 12 months in advance, it
I would pay,
seems like...
I appreciate you got real good reflective. Thanks for being such a good listener. I pay attention to the beliefs, and then I look at the goal, but then I look at those objectives in the strategic plan. And how solid are those objectives? Because those objectives define the working plan and what we're really going after in our working plan. So I think I think the objectives would say, hey, Dan, these objectives are this important that 5 years from now that you're trying to have some success in meeting these objectives.
I know I promised to quit, but I'll just throw this in there. The TSBA outline from the training that we received on the planning process, one of the items that they included in that outline was that the goals in the strategic plan should include measurable objectives. I found one in the strategic plan part, not the work plan part, of what we've already done, and it was the one-to-one. It's going to be rolled out within the next 4 years. That's measurable. Have we accomplished the one-to-one environment by 2020 or whatever that 4th year is? So I really honestly will quit at this point. Everything that I've ever seen in strategic planning and what the TSBA trained us to do was to put measurable goals in the strategic plan that are looking 5 years into the future. And I think what we're saying as a group, not unanimously,